When I asked my mother, why are we here? Why are we in this prison? She said simply, it's because we're Japanese.
My father was an immigrant from Hiroshima, Japan. My mother was born here.
My father believed, like a lot of other immigrants, that you could make money in the United States.
My dad always used to say, nothing like America.
In 1882, the Emperor of Japan allowed the people of Japan to leave the home islands. And thus the Japanese came to this country for economic opportunity.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
After the first few years, the Japanese immigrants were trying to get into other professions. And people were beginning to get worried about what they called a Japanese invasion.
My father could not buy land because he was not a citizen, but he also couldn't become a citizen.
My mother used to tell me that salesmen used to come to the door and she'd refuse to buy, and they say, why don't you go home, you damn Jap?
On December 7th, around 8 o'clock in the morning, Japanese airplanes bombed Pearl Harbor in Hawaii.
Since the unprovoked and dastardly attack, a state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire.
It was just a devastating day for all of us. We will never forget.
I went to volunteer, and they turned me down because they just didn't want any Japs.
General DeWitt was commanding general of the Western Area Defense Command. He's the one that said, a Jap's a Jap. And because I looked like the enemy, I was treated like the enemy.
We were cursed at and spit on. We were told to go back to the country where we came from. And I said, well, this is where I came from.
The FBI came and picked up my father immediately. It's just like the movies.
Right in the middle of the wedding reception, FBI came and arrested some of the people.
We had to turn in all our radios, shortwave, flashlights, guns, knives, whatever that they thought was contraband. President Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066.
As Commander-in-Chief, I have directed that all measures be taken for our defense.
The order stated that the West Coast was to be considered a military area and persons of Japanese ancestry were to be removed and housed away from the West Coast.
There were 10 war relocation centers to which persons of Japanese ancestry were sent.
By the time the war was over, there were about 120,000 people affected.
The military and civilian agencies alike determined to do the job as a democracy should, with real consideration for the people involved.
Friends of mine had to leave Terminal Island, and those people had only 48 hours.
We just felt it was something we had to do. I guess we considered our part for the war effort.
The restaurant, we just had to close up. So we just padlocked it and got out.
People just come and say, well, I'll give you $1 for that, I'll give you $5.
Like $5 for a brand new refrigerator. We burned a lot of things.
My mom got mad and she just picked up these great big plates. She just smashed it right on the floor. With every smash, it just broke her heart.
We could only take what we could carry.
I can remember things we didn't take, like our dog Ginger. We were not allowed to take pets.
walked with our suitcases to the train depot, and there were guards with rifles.
They had 2 MPs on each side, and they had bayonets on them. Why they had bayonets on them, I don't know.
The morning we left, it was sprinkling. My sister had overheard this lady say, "Look at, even the heavens are crying for us."
The great trek begins. A jet caravan heads for the government's war relocation project in the Owens Valley. A voluntary migration. It's in no sense a concentration camp, but a city with its front yard in the snow-peaked Sierra Nevadas. Here, eventually, 12,000 will live and work.
We were told that we are being evacuated so that the government can protect us. And the first thing that I had observed was that they had armaments, not facing out, but facing in.
And I remember seeing the guard tower and the barbed wire fence, and this blew my mind to think that we were going to be behind those wires.
My mother and father lived at the time in the Owens Valley, and they saw the people getting off the buses. My mother said, "I was so upset by that. These people don't belong there. They're American citizens."
They are not prisoners. They are not internees. They are merely dislocated people, the unwounded casualties of war.
I remember just seeing the rows of barracks, dirt all over, no plants or greenery.
Yes, do that next time. Exodus 10. Exodus 10.
The first thing that they told us to do was to grab a bag and put straws in the bag.
And that was our bed for that night.
But the first night, all of a sudden I realized that, my God, there are holes in the roof. I look up and I see the sky. I thought, my God, it's so beautiful.
And that night there was a pretty big windstorm. Well, the next morning when I got up, I looked at my mattress. Right where my head was, it's still all white, but then the rest of it was all covered with sand.
It was hot in the summer, bone chilling in the winter, and there was always the wind. There was always the wind.
The 300 or so residents of each block eat in a mess hall, cafeteria style, a combination of Oriental dishes to meet the taste of the Issei, born in Japan, and of American-type dishes to satisfy the Nisei, born in America.
We had nice cold jello on top of hot rice.
The daily life in Manzanar was just like any other life, except we didn't have any freedom and we didn't have any privacy.
We were all in a room which was only 20 by 25 feet, men and women. We did finally put up sheets to divide the room.
We all had to take a shower in the same place with a lot of other people. And I just couldn't get myself to go take a shower in that place.
People like my mother would stay up late hoping to take a shower when her neighbors weren't around.
My mom just kept blaming herself. She kept telling us, it'll be over, but I know every day is killing her.
I didn't like what was being done to the Japanese people, and they needed teachers. I went to the placement office and told them I wanted to go to Manzanar. They looked at me as though I had taken leave of my senses, but I got to go.
In the science classes, I remember a teacher says, pretend this is a Bunsen burner.
We didn't have a flag, So we would used to salute to an empty corner. Finally, one day, one of the boys said, well, why don't we draw a flag?
It must have been difficult for a teacher to talk about democracy put into a place like that.
We were American kids in there. This is American town.
We're not allowed to leave the camp to go play at high school outside of Manzanar, so we always had to be the home team. The home team advantage, yeah.
The worst memory was that we were prisoners.
There's nothing you can do about it. Then you just accept it. That's one of the things that got us through those hard times. 仕方がない. Nothing can be done. What can we do?
The Japanese people appreciate nature. So eventually the people got together and put in lawns and gardens.
Anything to kind of beautify and forget about the hardship a little bit.
And then they also had a dance band. They were called the Giant Bombers.
There was a very popular song at the time, Don't Fence Me In. And then I thought, gee, it sure is fitting that we're in a place like this within the barbed wire.
You get people confined in a small space like that, and you have no one to fight. You can't fight these military people with guns, so you attack each other, blame each other.
So all of these tensions began to boil.
Some of it had to do with the protest, but like any activity where you have a demonstration, other factors enter in.
A group of people, they ended up in front of the camp entrance. The MPs became worried that they were going to be rushed. And so a couple of them shot their rifles into the crowd. 2 young men were shot and killed. There was a loyalty oath questionnaire which was distributed in all the 10 camps. Question 27 asked if we would serve in the armed forces of the United States and go wherever ordered. Question 28 asked if you forswore allegiance to the Japanese emperor.
And how am I going to answer it? Because I can't forswear allegiance to the Japanese emperor, because I never had allegiance to him.
It caused a lot of confusion among the Issei who were not citizens. That meant that they would lose their Japanese citizenship if they did that, and that they would be people without a country because they couldn't become American citizens.
I was so mad though that they would dare to ask a question like that where it would tend to sort of break up a family.
I said no, because to be detained in a camp like this and be asked that kind of question, I thought that was ridiculous.
Those that said that they weren't loyal are the ones who went to Tule Lake, the camp that was way up by the Oregon border. And then from there, some of them were sent to Japan.
When I'm thinking back about all the no-no boys, they were bitter about the war, or they were bitter about the evacuation. They didn't want to go into the army.
Many of the young men refused to go for induction when they were called.
We had a neighbor who volunteered for the service, and at the time I thought, the guy's crazy.
I volunteered from a relocation center to show my loyalty and to prove that I had the right to live as a good American citizen.
The 442nd was part of the Department of the Army's effort to utilize Japanese Americans, but they kept them in a segregated unit.
You fought not only the enemy, but you fought prejudice, and you won.
These fellows really put their life on the line and went out there, and a lot of them got killed.
So now Monomoy was awarded the Medal of Honor because a German hand grenade was thrown into a group, and he threw himself on the hand grenade and sacrificed his life.
My gosh, here was a guy who gets the Congressional Medal of Honor and the mother is behind barbed wire. I thought, wow, that's justice.
In February of '43, they came out with the order that said you could go out of the camp, but you can't go back to the 3 Pacific Coast states.
You had to have a job, you had to have a place to stay, and you had to guarantee that you wouldn't be a liability to the community you were going to.
When I got ready to leave camp, and I'm 6, 7 years old, I was told to be fingerprinted. And I remember the soldier saying, "This is in case you do anything bad, we'll be able to catch you." That was a traumatic experience for me.
They gave me a small green card that gave me permission to leave Manzanar, and then went to Madison, Wisconsin.
Young kids would drive by and say, "Go home, Japs," and I'm thinking, oh boy, would I ever love to go home. But you couldn't. California was still closed at the time.
The war's over, the camps are going to close, so the government said, you got to get out, we're closing the camps. They gave each of us $25 and a ticket to wherever you're going to go. That was it. My folks, they worked all their lives, and in one swoop, everything they worked for was gone, and they were penniless.
I was able to go to different baking school under the GI Bill. I was able to start a bakery after the war.
It did create a lifelong friendships, but it was wrong. It was terribly wrong.
By the end of the war, there were no convictions or arrests of any person of Japanese ancestry accused of conspiracy or sabotage or espionage.
We were bona fide American citizens, and as citizens we had the right to due process. Still, it took a long time. You know, it took an awfully long time.
The legislation that I am about to sign provides for a restitution payment to each of the 60,000 survivors. Yet we must recognize that the internment of Japanese Americans was just that, a mistake. Here we admit a wrong.
Up to that point, I always felt like a second-class citizen. So when I got the apology, as if something was lifted off my head.
The thing that I lost are the freedom, but for these first-generation Japanese, like my father and others, they lost so much. No amount of money would ever compensate for what they went through.
We don't have a king, we don't have a queen, you know, we have a constitution. And when we violate that constitution, we begin to unravel as a nation.
The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects.
Against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated.
I think today that Americans need to be so alert because the individual rights of people have got to be preserved.
No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property
without due process of law.
we going to make the same mistake that we did with a whole group of my family and friends? I really worry about that.
I still think this is the best country in the world, hands down. It's just up to everybody to see that it stays that way.